There's a lot that has already been said about incels. Some sympathize with them, and some outright despise them. I'm not here to support either viewpoint. There are enough people doing that already, and that's not what we do on this channel. Instead, we're going to take a step back and try to understand why. And here's a hint. It goes deeper than you probably think.
What is the new word? Incel? What is the word?
Incel. It's
Incel?
involuntary celibate.
Yeah.
Tomorrow is the day of retribution.
As people talk about incel, it made me wonder, you might call this a new phenomenon.
They're calling themselves incels.
Incel is short for involuntary celibate.
Living as ugly subhuman on a worthwhile day of the year.
If you actually sit down to think about it, incels are weird. No, I don't mean the incels themselves, although we all know many of them are.
I went through years of girls in grades 9 through 12 publicly making fun of my little friend for the entertainment of small crowds.
I mean the fact that they even exist at all. Why is there a sizable community of men who bond online over the simple fact that they haven't had sex? And more broadly, why is there an entire ecosystem of online communities and content catered specifically to men that have relationship problems? And why is there not something similar for women? I, for one, am very interested in finding the answer to this question. Let's take it back to the 1990s and the fetal stages of the internet. The story of the incels begins here. The first online forum to use the term incel was actually started by a woman, a Canadian college student named Elena. The website was called Elena's Involuntary Celibacy Project, and it was a place where both men and women shared their experiences of feeling rejected. Eventually, Elena's site would fizzle out, but throughout the rest of the 90s and the 2000s, a number of similar sites would appear, most of them nothing like what we see today. But the proportions changed. Over time, these communities skewed more and more heavily male, and with no other perspectives to balance them out, they mutated.
Police have been questioning the driver behind the wheel of this white van who basically mowed people down for as long as a mile.
We begin this morning with new details of a disturbed young man's rampage in Isla Vista, California.
Police in Toronto are treating the vicious murder of a woman in February as an act of terrorism after discovering evidence it may have been motivated by violent misogyny.
But hold on a minute. This doesn't make sense. How can you go from feeling sad about your lack of romantic success to just straight up murdering people? And what happened to the women on these sites? Did they leave because of the misogyny? Or did the misogyny happen because they left? Or did they all just one day stop having problems finding a partner? To find the answers to these questions, we need to pan out and examine the wider context. There is a growing divide between the sexes. Take a look at this graph. For every generation, women vote more Democratic and men vote more Republican. The disparity is greater the younger the generation, and you can see it for yourself on social media. Today, if you decide to go on TikTok, Facebook, or God forbid Twitter, you are bound to find men and women arguing, a lot. In a paper published at the turn of the century, Engelhardt and Norris put forth a developmental theory of the gender gap. The theory goes roughly like this. As societies grow wealthier, something called post-materialism begins to emerge as a result of most people's basic needs being fulfilled. Politics in such a society prioritizes questions of personal freedom, self-expression, and equality over those of physical and material security. As such, the interests of men and women begin to diverge. Here's what I think. The internet, combined with a post-material society, has allowed us to revert back to primitive tribalism and our most basic instincts. To risk stating the obvious, males and females of most species are different, and humans are not an exception. According to a study by Jared Diamond, the guy that wrote this, and Rebecca Steffoff, size difference between sexes is indicative of polygyny, or a male having multiple female partners. The more females in a male's harem, the greater the size difference. This can be seen in gorillas, where a male gorilla will usually have about 3 to 6 females in his harem. In gibbons, on the other hand, which are monogamous and have only one partner, there is no size difference between the sexes. This seems to suggest that for most of our history, when we were living in caves hunting mammoths, picking blueberries, and drawing cool pictures of deer, we were also a polygynous species. That could explain why there is about a 7% difference in height between men and women across all demographics, with men being larger. Okay, so cool, that's interesting, but how is it relevant? It's relevant because of what it implies. Here's another graph. Women tend to be much more selective in who they view as potential partners. This falls in line with the polygyny theory and also explains why men are more competitive. In the past, women often married for security, physical, financial, or otherwise, but in a post-material world where those things are becoming less and less important, the dating scene is changing. The problem, of course, is that there are only so many women to go around, and in polygynous species, the majority of males are left without partners. Now before you flame me in the comments, I recognize that this is an incel talking point. The difference between an incel and a regular person looking at this data is their interpretation of it. Women are not responsible for who they find attractive. Like any other human being, they can't just decide to be attracted to one person or the other, or even one sex or the other. The reason I bring up the chimps and gibbons at all is because it offers an explanation as to why there are so many lonely men, and why women don't really have an equivalent to those unbearably annoying online pickup artists. But it doesn't explain how you turn from just a lonely man into a resentful misogynist. For that, we need to go to the internet. Tribalism is as old as we are. In the past, it was a social tool that allowed us to organize into groups for security. But now, in a, you guessed it, post-material society, its only function is to create echo chambers that breed, at best, an uncle at Thanksgiving ranting about how Joe Biden is a space alien, and at worst, Elliot Rodger. The internet has made it that much easier to close yourself off from the world and only associate with people that push you deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole. Internet and social media also offer a form of socialization that's far easier than regular socializing, especially for people who are shy or introverted. Unfortunately, many of these people are lonely men, and when lonely men go on the internet, very little good happens. They will see guys posting pictures of themselves on yachts surrounded by women. They will set up a Tinder account only to swipe for hours and get 0 matches. And when they ask for help with dating, they will be met with propaganda videos and echo chambers masquerading as support groups, and they will become resentful. And for women, they are overwhelmed with messages from 40-year-old men asking for pictures of their feet, and thousands of comments from grease-ridden teenagers saying women can't be funny. When this is your experience with men, it's easy to think of them as inherently misogynistic and entitled, and become resentful. Incels have become convinced, due to the fact that they rarely interact with anyone outside of IBlameWomen.org or whatever, that they are owed a relationship, and they operate under this assumption. They will pull up studies like the OkCupid one and say that it means we need to go back to oppressing women and forcing them into household roles. They will look at graphs and charts and say it means that women are entitled and that they're somehow doing this on purpose. I don't think I need to elaborate on how abhorrent some of the things they say are. But these are all once regular people. They weren't just born this way. Circumstances led them here, and the first step to healing this giant rift is to try to understand each other. I'll end with this. At a commencement speech at Kenyon College in 2005, David Foster Wallace famously told a story about perspective.
Greetings, thanks, and congratulations to Kenyon's graduating class of 2005. There are these 2 young fish swimming along, and they happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way, who nods at them and says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" And the 2 young fish swim on for a bit, and then eventually one of them looks over at the other and goes, "What the hell is water?"
The point of this, whatever it's called, parable I guess, is that the way we experience the world is filtered through our circumstances, and we often fail to realize that our experience could be radically different from someone else's. I'm no better. I sometimes fall victim to this too. To bring it back to the topic of this video, as a general rule, when men and women have problems with dating and relationships, they are at opposite extremes of one another. Women are barraged with message after message from men they are not attracted to, harassed, followed, and threatened. Men, on the other hand, are left with little romantic attention from women, isolated, left alone, and ignored. Both are convinced that they have it worse than the other because they don't know what it's like to be the other. The same goes for different races, classes, nationalities, and so on. Your background is the water the proverbial fish version of you is swimming in, and it shapes the way you view the world. If we're ever going to fix the problem of tribalism, and stop things like Isla Vista from happening again, the first step is not demonization, but compassion. Thanks for watching.